If you were able to have a superpower for 1 hour, what power would it be and what would you do with it? Okay.
Are you asking me the question?
Yes.
Repeat the question, please.
If you had a superpower for 1 hour, what would your power be and what would you do with it?
Superpower. Well, I would improve my rate of walking and hiking and running for 1 hour. I would get to a point where I could once again beat my wonderful husband in the race. I would, I don't know what else I would do. That takes a lot of time and energy just doing that much. Much more. I've been good in the past in beating my husband when it's a race, so I think I can handle that. That's all I'm going to do.
Sure.
Looking across the room, yes, I'm sure.
Okay, a rollover occurs right in front of you on I-25. You pull over. Then what happens, Mark?
I say to myself, oh my God, my adrenaline is rushing, and I'm going to use that to calm myself down and think about how to apply the first aid training that I took back in high school. And I'll assess the situation and see first and foremost if the person is in any other danger. So if that person is not in any danger, I will begin to administer first aid with that person. So assess what their situation is. Is their airway open? Are they breathing? And I would also look for somebody to call 911 and also make sure that that situation is safe where nobody else can get injured. So I'm looking for some other time right here, but I don't have it. But I will continue to monitor that person until the ambulance or any other EMT comes to take over the duties that I had, and pray to God that that person is going to be okay. Thank you.
Mr. Timer, may I ask what preset you're using?
Number 1.
Thank you. Just checking.
Did it seem like that took too long?
I know. We have a long way to go. All right. Which famous musician would you hang out with this weekend, Jeff Schneider?
What famous musician would I hang out with this weekend? Well, the first one that pops to mind is Sting, only because I recently watched a concert on my new Apple TV, and I was able to go to YouTube and search for concerts. Sting popped up, and that was an interesting concert that he did. Playing a lot of his old songs and a lot of renditions with big orchestras and things like that. Now, the problem with watching some of these old musicians that were very famous when I was young is that it makes me realize I'm getting old. So I think that Sting and I could really hang out and talk about the good times, talk about what it was like when we were younger, and maybe he could show me a little bit on the guitar, teach me how to do a couple different riffs or chords, and we just have a good old time hanging out.
Check out the Stevie Wonder video of Fragile with Sting.
Okay.
He does it better than Sting. An amazing solo too. Anyway, Lost at Sea. Which 3 items must you have with you, Emily?
I've never been lost at sea. I've been lost in a lake, though. And I think I can. Somehow I got trapped in the riptide that was in the lake. It wasn't. It's a lake that connects to the sea, but it's not a very big gap to connect it. And I managed to get caught in that. So I ended up on the other side of the island, far away from my family. So the first thing I would want is a cell phone. Call for help. Hello, hello, can anyone hear me? The second thing I would want is lots of water. Oh my goodness, so much water. When I was lost, I grew so thirsty. If there hadn't been civilization 30 miles away, I don't think I could have made it. So, of course, my parents were absolutely worried. Another reason to have a cell phone. And the final thing I would want, which may sound strange, but it made sense, is something to do. Walking's well and good, but when you're terrified that you're going to be left behind, you don't really want to worry about that. You needed something else to distract you. It's hard to decide what I would have done. I personally love to read a good book, which would have been helpful. Reading is walking, tripping over roots, and avoiding trees, branches that continually knock my book away. But otherwise, it was fun.
All right, Bruce, explain the process that you would use to fit the most people into a British phone booth.
Well, there's a problem. I have not seen a phone booth for years. I think that's going to be the first problem that I have to resolve. That I'll probably have to go to like the Smithsonian Museum, probably do a Google search to even find out where they exist, because I wouldn't even know where to find a phone booth here at all in town. And probably it would not be a British phone booth. That would be the first gigantic problem. And I'd have to get superpowers to find a phone booth to go all over the world, because it's going to probably be a very elusive type of object. And then when I find it, it's going to probably be in some weird location. So if I'm lucky, it'll be in a location where the people are smaller. Then my challenge of fitting the most people in will be very easy. But if I unfortunately find it in a location where there's sumo wrestlers, I could be in for a big problem. I could move it though, potentially. But I'm not really quite sure what I would have to do to get the most people in. But I think the best problem would be is finding a phone booth in a location like Disney World, where there's a lot of little people running around, and then I can win.
All right, getting a little more serious. Mary T, which is better? To love and lose, or stay single?
Mr. Table Topics Man, I choose to take Kay's question. If I had superpowers for only 1 hour, what would they be? And who would Well, I would be Mary T. And I would have the superpowers to disappear and materialize wherever I wanted to be. I would go to Australia. I've always wanted to go to Australia. I would see the koalas. I would go over the Rocky Hills. I would go to the ocean and maybe see some sharks. Materialize and maybe see the smallest of the small fishes or amoeba that Alex might talk about in one of his speeches. Though, the one thing that I'll have to do at the last 5 minutes would be able to come back to the rollover that Mark saw right in front of him. And I would look to see if anyone was hurt. And at that point, if anyone was, I would help them. And I would then materialize back to the superwoman of Mary T. Will. Mr. Taylor.
That was the sober for world peace.
That world peace.
All right, Back to the Future. What would you tell yourself, Mel? You've seen Back to the Future? No? All right. Okay, if you were in a car that went back to the future, went back in time, and you could show yourself something or tell yourself something in an earlier version, what would you tell yourself?
Pretty good.
Do I get to decide when I go back to?
Absolutely.
I would go back to about age 6 and tell myself to start skiing at a younger age instead of waiting till I was an adult. Because when you're younger, you have no fear whatsoever. And that is the time to do all sorts of things. And of course, when we were all 6, we wanted to sit and watch cartoons, when we should have been doing useful things, like learning and being awesome. So I think the younger me should have been more insistent to my parents about all the cool things I could have been doing. I make my parents sound horrible, they're really not. But yes, just think of all the things I could have accomplished when I was 6. Thank you.
All right, to recap, Mary T. talked about not loving and losing, but her superpowers. Jeff talked about his weekend hanging out with Sting. Mark talked about his rollover accident in very practical terms. Emily talked about what she would bring if she were lost. Bruce talked about his phone booth excursion across the world. And Kate, I'm not sure what she talked about. Send your votes in. Mr. Oh, I should hand this off.
Kay didn't.
Please vote.